You ever get one of those letters that just makes your blood boil? Because I sure did. I had just come in from a peaceful morning on the dock, sipping my coffee and watching the sunrise dance across the lake. When I saw it, a bright orange violation notice duct taped to the side of my boat, right there on my own dock. According to the letter, the Willow Ridge HOA was giving me 48 hours to remove my boat from what they claimed were community waters or face a daily fine. They even had the audacity to threaten towing it at my expense. Now, normally, I'm a pretty calm guy, but this made me laugh, not out of amusement, but in disbelief. Because the lake they were talking about? It's called Lawson Lake. As in, named after my grandfather. As in, my family has owned it and the surrounding property since 1955. But the HOA didn't know that. Or maybe they did, and just thought I wouldn't fight back. Either way, they picked the wrong guy to mess with. A quick backstory. I'm Mason Lawson. I used to work in cybersecurity until a major firm bought out my company last year. Burned out and fed up with city life, I decided to move back to the lake house where I spent every summer as a kid. My grandfather was a war vet turned conservationist, and he taught me everything I know about fishing, land stewardship, and standing your ground. So when I got that notice, I called my neighbor, Henry Becker. He's in his 70s, built his own house on the far end of the lake, and knew my grandfather well. Henry wasn't surprised. Turns out the HOA had slowly been pushing their boundaries, claiming control over parts of the lake that don't legally belong to them. Then came the real kicker. Henry told me that the HOA had been hosting fancy fishing tournaments for years on my lake. Not just small gatherings, but full-blown events with banners, catered BBQs, and dozens of boats. And not once did they ask for permission. At first, I was furious. But then, I got curious. What were they planning next? I dug around and discovered that the Willow Ridge HOA, led by their power-hungry president, Brad Delaney, was pushing a major lakeside development deal. They wanted to build a luxury resort complete with a marina and private condos. And guess whose lake was at the center of their blueprint? Yep, mine. They thought no one would stop them, that the old Lawson property was abandoned, that they could slowly rewrite history by claiming the lake was a shared resource. What they didn't count on was me still holding the deed, and having a lawyer friend named Olivia, who just happens to specialize in land rights and environmental law. We got to work. First, I installed cameras around the lake to monitor any unauthorized activity. Then Olivia helped me file an emergency injunction against the HOA to halt any development plans and prevent further use of the lake without my consent. But the real fun started at the next HOA board meeting. I showed up unannounced, sat in the back, and waited. Sure enough, Brad started blabbering about beautification policies and lake regulations. That's when I raised my hand and asked a simple question. Who exactly owns Lawson Lake? Brad stumbled, tried to bluff, claimed it was a communal asset managed by the HOA. That's when I pulled out the deed. You could hear a pin drop. I made it crystal clear that not only was the HOA trespassing, but that any future use of my lake, especially for profit, would result in lawsuits. Plural. I wish I could say they backed off immediately. But Brad doubled down. The very next day, my boat mysteriously disappeared from the dock, with a second violation notice left in its place. They called it impounded. That was the last straw. We went public. Olivia helped me release a statement to the local press. I shared photos, security footage, and the full history of Lawson Lake. The community was shocked. Residents had been told for years that part of their HOA fees went toward maintaining the lake. They were outraged to learn they'd been misled. Turns out, Brad and a few other board members had been quietly courting out-of-town investors to back their resort project. But once the media got wind of the truth, the investors bailed. The HOA board crumbled under the pressure. Brad resigned. Several members were sued by residents. And me? I got my boat back with an apology. But I didn't stop there. Olivia and I worked with some of the remaining HOA members. The Reasonable Honesto formed the Lawson Lake Trust, a nonprofit that allows controlled access to parts of the lake for residents who respect its boundaries. The Old Fishing Club reformed under new rules. No more pretentious tournaments or backroom deals. Just regular folks enjoying the lake the right way. We even turned the East Shore into a small public park, just like my grandfather would have wanted. I keep that old boat just the way it is weathered. Simple and proudly non-compliant. And every time I take it out, I remember what Grandpa used to say. The lake doesn't belong to whoever talks the loudest. It belongs to whoever cares for it. So tell me, have you ever had to deal with a power-hungry HOA or community group? Drop your stories in the comments. I want to hear how you stood your ground.